Plan. So welcome to you. So we'll discuss first of all the origins of the Mobilize brand. Tell us a bit more about how it came about.
Well, it's a very interesting story, actually. We created Mobilize a little more than a year ago, and I must say that it was the first time in 120 years that Mobilize was, that Renault did create a brand. And so why did we create a brand? We thought that mobility is changing. It's not exactly what it used to be. And one of the reasons why mobility is changing is because there are things that are not fair, right? I mean, for example, you buy a car and you use it 10% of the time. In average, that's what it is, maximum 10%. You buy a car and 3 years after, it's worth 50% of its value. And we all know that currently, as long as we're not yet completely fully electric, the car are responsible for 15% of the emission. And we think this is not fair. There is a place for disruption. So if there is a place for disruption, why leave it to others? Why not do it ourselves? And that's why we created Mobilize.
So tell us a bit more about Mobilize.
Well, Mobilize is a completely different business model. We understand that. We also understand the problems of customers which are facing an increase in the cost of cars, especially if you go hybrid or electric. We're also facing the fact that you have more and more congestion in cities. Cities are, even in some cases, kind of banning cars or wanting to remove the car from the center of the city. So we need to offer something that helps people from going from point A to point B without necessarily owning the car. And that's what we want to do.
So tell us how it works.
Well, actually, another thing which is very different about Mobilize is we don't want to sell car, which is extremely different. In a company that for 120 years have been selling car, thinking about the product more than of its usage at the end of the day, we want to do the complete reverse. We don't want to sell car, we want to sell the services, a one-stop shop offer of services around a mobility object, which happens to be a car. That's exactly what we want. We want to sell services.
So if you have a consumer who wants to access a service, how do they do it?
Well, in most of the services that we want to do is well, you just, at first it's fully digital. Because the way we build the business model, which is called vehicle as a service. So vehicle as a service means you don't own, you use the service. So you have a bundle of services, you have a tech platform in the middle, and then you have the product, which is the car. So if the customers want to use the service, he goes on an app, depending on the type of services we want to offer, and he just have to order the service.
And how's it going?
Well, it's going pretty well. Actually, we have a variety of products that we are already on the market, but the most emblematic ones are what we do for car sharing or ride hailing, where we already have quite a few activities. Just here, for example, in Madrid, we have a company called Ziti. We're partner in this company with Ferrovial, which is a Spanish company. We launched the product a few years ago for car sharing, and so you go on your app, you order the ride that you want, or the car that you want to use. You have a choice between a Zoe and Spring, which are two fully electric cars, obviously. And then you can access to your car, open the door, drive the car, close the door when you're over, and that's it. Very easy.
So you say, as you said, that you've been in the business for 120 years. Well, the business has been going. You haven't, obviously, been in the business for 120 years. May feel like it, but you haven't. But you say that you wanted to be the disruptor. It's very unusual to see such an established business try and be the new kid on the block, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, actually, it is not easy, to be honest, because when you're in a group that used to do cars for 220 years and you're telling them, hey guys, we first need to design the service. What exactly do user needs? What exactly do operators of mobility needs? And when you know the service you have, you make sure you have the software stack, the bricks, the techno bricks, and then only you think about the type of product you want to build. So it's a completely reverse way of doing it. And it's working well, but then the company needs to understand that some of the investment that we're going to be making are not to sell car, but to sell services.
And so is it a new business model then?
It's a completely new business model. And the way we think about it is indeed the reverse way. the cars that we're going to be using are not at all looking like the one that we would be providing to the people that are really just willing a car to own it or to have it in the garage. These cars are designed for mobility. Let me take an example if you want. We're going to be launching next year a car which is called a service based on the car which is called Duo. This car has been designed for the mobility usage. It's more than 50% made out of recycled material. It's going to be 95% recyclable. It has to be, it's a quad recycle. It's very, very small place on the road. It's only 2 people. Why? Because we have made studies and we understand that in most cases in car sharing or ride hailing, you have what? 1.2 people in the car, so you don't need 4 seats, so you can reduce what you need. It's made to be easy to be repaired. It's made to be easy to be washable. It can be washable just with flat water. And by doing so, you are going to be able to reduce the cost of usage of the mobility operators. And that is what the business is. You are talking about business model. We want to help mobility operators, which we know for the moment are not earning a lot of money, to say the least. We want to help them having the right product to offer so that they can be profitable and that we can be profitable.
Yeah, it's a hugely ambitious goal, isn't it?
It is. Again, you have to change completely the mindset. You need to think about the quality of the innovation of the service, not only the innovation within the car. You have to make a whole bunch of new people work together because we want to work as an ecosystem, not only as us Mobilize, but we're taking the advantage of being within the Renault Group, which is a big Renault Group, but we're also working with a lot of other type of stakeholders in the ecosystem. Obviously, we discuss with the users, what do they want? We discuss with the operators, what do they need? We discuss with other mobility operators. As for example, in Paris, we have what we call a coalition with Mobility 360, where we're talking to public transportation, BlaBlaCar, Uber, other mobility operators to not only think about one way of solving the problem, but different way of getting together in order to not add congestion, but really provide solutions.
How does that sit within a car company then that is trying to sell cars?
Well, first, I think the big important thing is that this project is very much supported by our new CEO, Luca De Meo, which many people in Spain know because he's been leading SEAT for quite some time. And his belief, our belief, my belief is that we have to change. We used to be a car company using tech. We want to be a tech company based on car. And Mobilize is this exact example of what you need to do. And that's why we have a huge ambition, actually. We want to represent 20% of Renault Group turnover by 2030. It's quite ambitious, but that means that we have the full support of the Renault Group to get there. And the idea is to use all the benefits of being in a car OEM, i.e., by being a car manufacturer, we know how to design car. So we're using the knowledge of these 120 years, but we have our own team. We have our own team of designers and engineers to, as I said before, really do the exact car which is needed for such a service. We obviously have a lot of engineers within Renault, a portion of that being software engineers. But in Mobilize, as we have already quite a lot of scale-ups or startups, whatever you want to call them, we also have quite a lot of software engineers. And that makes that we have access to roughly 600 software engineers already in order to make sure that the techno bricks that we need in order to offer the services, for example, financing services, insurance services, energy solution services, payment services, we already have a lot of what we need. We just need to put them together. By also being within the Renault Group, we have access to the dealers. The Renault Group has 6,000 point of sales in Europe, meaning that contrary to any startups, we already have the capillarity. Last but not least, within the Renault Group, we also have plants. So we have the plants and the garage that can help us recondition the car. If you put all that, which we can benefit from, plus what is within Mobilize, i.e. our engineers, software engineers, and the captive, the financial arms. We have a very, very strong captive, which used to be called RCI, which we have renamed Mobilize Financial Services. That means that you can have access to all the levers in order to have a bundled solution and not being able to offer one piece or the other. You can have the full spectrum. It's a one-stop shop offer with a lot of tech, either the tech in the car or the tech in the software.
Do you think that the car industry actually has a responsibility now to be game changers, which is what you're trying to be as well, to invest a significant amount of their profits into being disruptors so that they can not just, stay relevant, but also help shift the industry move forward?
Yeah, I do think so. I do think so because I think we're the best placed in order to be a big part of this new business model. Again, we have all the capabilities. We have the customers. I mean, we have been delivering mobility. We used to be called the car manufacturer, but at the end of the day, what were we offering to customers? A way to be mobile, a way to access jobs, a way to have the freedom to go on vacation or to do whatever and transport their family. So I think we still have this responsibility, but as the need has changed, we need to change ourselves. If not, we're going to be disrupted by all the startups and scale-ups and leasing company you can talk to, which all want to go to this mobility business. So either we're part of it and we want to be leader in the forefront of it, or we're just going to be then a shell provider, a provider of a tool which has become so sophisticated that what is needed in this tool is the techno bricks, is the data. We all know now that a car has becoming so sophisticated that actually it's kind of a phone on wheels, right? So yes, I do think we have a strong responsibility. Also, as an OEM, especially Renault and the Alliance, we've been in the electric mobility for 10 years. So I think we understand better than anybody else on Earth, including the newcomers, what does mean an electric ecosystem. We've been selling EV cars for 10 years, and we perfectly know that beyond the car, there is all this ecosystem that needs to be built for which we have solution. We know how to provide a charge pass. We know how to provide charging solutions. We know how to provide what is the exact health of my battery. So if I have a car and I want to resell an electric car, I can reassure the future owner. We know what is the duration of a battery. We know how to use batteries as a second life, and we know how to recycle battery. So we need to use all that to make sure that we leverage every type of element that can bring a way to reduce the cost of the electromobility, because we all know it's more expensive than the mobility we know today.
We've been talking for over the past 3 hours a little bit about how different generations approach car ownership and usage. Is that very much play into what you're doing now? How younger people are coming through and wanting different things?
Yeah, but it's very funny because mobility is very different from one place to the other, one country to the next, one city to the next. It's very different within cities, in the suburbs, in the countryside, extremely different. And then, you're right, it's different depending on your age. I think clearly the younger generation do not see cars as the status it used to be, especially in cities. And for example, in France, the average age at which you pass your driving license is now something like 26. In the past, you wanted to get your driving license when you were 18, right? Now it's 26. That means they want something different. And that's, by the way, one of the reasons one of our vehicle, Duo, which will come out next year, is going to be available without driving license, because we also need to take into consideration what they want. Clearly, younger generation, they want to go to point one to point B. Now, my view is that when they're going to get married and have kids and move to the suburbs, they will want their car still.
How will that work? They will be able to take it without a driving license?
Sorry?
How will they be able to take the car without a driving
Because
license?
it's going to be, with regulation, you can do, like, it's a quadricycle, it's not a car, so you can take it without a driving license.
You mentioned the word regulation there, and we've again talked about that a little bit beforehand. Do you feel that governments have been very slow to kind of catch up or have the foresight to be able to enable digital transformation that we're seeing?
Well, I don't know about the digital transformation if it is the role of the government and the authorities. I think the authorities are more linked to the usage of mobility, and I'm sure we're going to talk to that in a moment, and they have a role to play there. But on the digital front, I'm not sure it's the role of the government. It's really up to us, companies, corporate, to make sure that we understand the new trends and that we're able to answer it. The fact that a car is now more and more connected, the fact that we're working on software-defined vehicle, make us able to use more than even before the type of data that you have in a car. That can be used in order to help the user journey, but that can also be used, and that's also the role of Mobilize, in order to help collectivities, authorities, to have the data they need in order to better plan the journeys within the city, to better plan where to install charging station. We even have some areas where, by the data that you get on the car, thanks to camera and suspension, monitoring, etc., you can monitor the road health. By monitoring the road health, you know that France, for example, is spending billions on a yearly basis to maintain the road. If we can provide early signs of where the road is not in a good situation, in a good health, the cities can save a lot of money by repairing before it's too late. And that's indeed what we want to do also with the data that we have in the car. So the role of governments in that area, I'm not sure it has to be major. It's up to us to come with what we can do with what we have in a software-defined vehicle.
Okay, Clotilde, thank you very much for that conversation.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Clotilde is staying with me because we're going to have a panel discussion now, and we're going to talk about the transformation of the automotive industry. So let's move over there while I introduce our panelists who are joining us. Well, changing demands, stiffer competition, new regulation, economic and health crises, the automotive industry really is evolving and needs to transform. But how? What are the challenges? What are the opportunities? In this discussion, we're going to take a look at how technology can help us solve mobility problems that we face in the cities that we live in. Please welcome to the stage Javier Mateos Castro, CEO of Zity by Mobilize, which Clotilde mentioned. And Javier is an industrial engineer. In 2017, he became CEO in the car-sharing company Zity, which is a joint venture owned by Renault and Ferrovial. Welcome to you. Please also welcome Raul Blanco Diaz, General Secretary of Industry and Small and Medium Business, Ministry of Industry, Trade and Tourism. Welcome to you. Thank you very much for being with us. And lastly, Virginie Boutet, researcher at the École de Pont de Paris Tech in the City Mobility Transport Lab. Welcome to you all. Good to see you all. Even though we've just been talking, Clotilde, I just want to ask you a more general question about the automotive industry, and not just why it's important that it changes, but whether or not there is a collaborative approach, because we've been talking this morning very much about how everybody needs to come together to institute the change that's needed. Obviously, you all need to make your own profits, but with that kind of to one side, has there been a collaborative approach, and do you agree that there does need to be one?
Well, I'm not sure we can say in the change towards mobility that there is a collaborative approach. Everyone is looking at it, I think, in a different way. I think us within Renault Group and Mobilize, I think we have the one which have the more comprehensive view of what the change can be and going to vehicle as a service. It's kind of difficult to collaborate in this area of the mobility pure. First, there is regulation. You cannot do much things talking to each other without taking any much risk. But I think all OEMs today, all car manufacturers, are very concerned about the fact and knowing the fact that there will be changes and we need to go along with it. But everybody has a different answer to that. There has been some collaboration. If you look at collaboration between German OEM in the car sharing and ride-hailing business, but it's not the vast majority, let's put it that way.
Okay, thank you. Virginia, if you can talk to us about your area of focus at the City Mobility Transport Lab, what are you looking at in particular?
So, thank you. I'm very glad to be here. So, what we look at the City Mobility Transport Lab is the global transformation that mobility is undergoing all around the world. Because as everybody knows here, mobility needs to transition, and it's a global challenge that will take global forms, but with local solutions. So what we look at in the Worldwide Observatory of Shared Mobility Services in particular is the development of shared mobility digital platforms around the world, whether we're talking about vehicle sharing services, ride sharing services, microtransit services, or all these types of shared mobility services. What we find is that the development of these services is a very fast development, but not only that, but also that it's a global phenomenon, and a global phenomenon in which not only developed countries are taking a part, but also emerging economies, large emerging economies, and developing countries are taking their part too. So shared mobility is really part of the transition that mobility has to undergo, and we need to be aware of what's happening around the world. Only to take an example, there is a very strong mobility startup in Egypt that is developing digitally supported microtransit services, of which we could all learn from, considering the types of services we currently have in European cities, for instance, and the type of services we want to see developed in complementarity with public transit if we want to better organize the transition to mobility. But I do agree with your earlier comments that there will need to be collaboration among stakeholders in this mobility transition, in particular to realign certain value creation for private interest and public interest, not only talking to the private customers, but also to the citizens.
May I add something? I fully agree with you. It's difficult to sometimes work with your peers. But what we're trying to do, as I said earlier, I think we need to work with different mobility operators. Your exact competitor is complicated, but other means, like public transportation, car transportation, car sharer operator, yes, we should work together.
Okay, thank you. And Raul, what do you see the biggest challenges?
The main, about the challenges, sorry, because I can hear you very well.
You can't hear?
Oh, here it comes.
No,
Is that better?
About, from the side of the government, what we are doing in a little bit regarding to the challenges and the situation that you are describing. Since during the last 2 years, we have been defining a special program, a special project for the automotive sector, the mobility sector in Spain. So on both sides, on the demand side, including how to promote the electric and electrified vehicle demand and how to foster the infrastructure on one side, and on the other side, on the offer, so more linked to industry, the industrial programs, in order to develop all the electric and electrified and connected vehicle in Spain. That means more than 4 billion euros during in the period 2021-2023, dedicated to this subject. Last 2 weeks ago, we closed the call for the electric and connected vehicle with around 3 billion euros for projects of value chain in the automotive sector, going from batteries to electric and electrified vehicle platforms, and then also components. All of the main the OEMs, the main producers, the main manufacturers in Spain are participating, also in cooperation with other components industry, with other agents, with new entries in terms of, in example, in batteries, more than 3 billion euros dedicated that will transform the sector from now till 2025. So the program is now on being evaluated, and from now till 2025, the investments will be setting up around the country. So very important. This is one of the main industrial programs in the European Union dedicated to the automotive sector. On the other side, we have the demand side. So foster the electric vehicle, the selling of the electric vehicle in Spain, what we call the program MOVES, and more than 800 million euros dedicated to promote and foster the demand in Spain, especially in this moment after the pandemic situation, etc.
Okay, thank you. Javier, City by Mobilize is present in 4 cities, Madrid, Paris, Lyon, and Milan. Tell us about how it works and how it's going.
Well, it's not easy to select the next steps. 4 years ago, when we launched Madrid, it was our first city, and of course, it was somehow, what is going to be the next step? Once we successfully launched Madrid and more than 400,000 people join us, we think, okay, let's see, Paris could be an option, Lyon could be an option, or Milano. I will say that there are 4 different characteristics that we are looking for in a new city. The first one is, of course, the main figures of the city, how many people, the density of the population, if there is any traffic or pollution congestion there, what could be the value added for the car sharing business, not talking about city, but also any other car sharing, and also an electric one. Could be interesting for the city, for the citizens, or not. The second one could be linked to what is the strategy of the city, where we see different cities that, in most of the cases, could be really a target city for us. Is the city really concerned about the current situation and wants to evolve or not? It's pushing somehow new type of mobilities as car sharing could be, and we can be a solution, see as a solution for the city or not, and different strategies linked to parking slot dedicated for car sharing, hubs for charging electric vehicles, or any other that could make sense for us. It's pushing us to go to these cities. The third one could be related with the maturity of the market. These new mobilities are quite evolving quite fast. So we don't want to be the first, but also we don't want to be the latest one. So trying to balance what's the level of maturity of each city, it could be a good tool, a good lever to select the city. And finally, are we adding value to the citizens or not? If there is a great public transport, a very cheap taxi solution, maybe we are not the ones that need to be live in this city. So if we are adding the value we want to add to the citizens, and finally, as we have had the experience of Madrid, Lyon, or Paris, and next week in Milano, of course we are adding value. Thousands of people are joining us and seeing a very simple way to go from A to B, very adapted to their needs, solving different use cases, a very affordable solution for them, and at the right price. So at this moment, what we see is that there are plenty of cities that are in this approach. A lot of them in Europe that are under the focus of city. And now next step is to prioritize which one is the best for us, and also which one could give us the market we are looking for. Regarding also the news, as Clotilde has said, what type of vehicle and services we are going to receive from Mobilize in the future, and we can add value through the data, through the services, through the cars, of course, but these are the main ones that allow us to do it.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to ask you, what are the biggest challenges and opportunities that you all see for the automotive sector? I'll start with you, Virginie, first.
What's interesting in the type of worldwide competition we're seeing in shared mobility services is that behind the scenes, these are not the same investors behind all the startups or all the new mobility services. There are companies from the IT sector, there are local entrepreneurs, there are companies from the public transport operation, and companies from the automotive industry. And all these players have different assets in investing in shared mobility services. What's interesting is that, and Clotilde mentioned it earlier in the interview, the automotive industry already has a very strong foothold in local, in cities, in local territories. And that is interesting because working hand in hand with local authorities is something that will be extremely important in the way shared mobility services can indeed be leveraged, can be fully developed or developed to their full potential locally to be part of the wider mobility transition. Not all of the stakeholders I mentioned earlier, for instance, the IT industry doesn't have that type of local cooperation with authorities and local foothold. And that is really something really interesting, the way that these different stakeholders will be able to adapt to local conditions will play a significant part in the way competition develops in the future, from my point of view.
So,
Raoul, yeah.
from my point of view, is how to combine industry and mobility. From the side of the government, in some sense, there will be no mobility without industry. So, how to match the evolution of the industry? Everything is changing very fast, as my colleagues are saying, but in Europe we should take profit of our solid industrial and technological base. We have an excellent technological and industrial base that could be the perfect base for the next challenges, for the next steps in mobility, in terms of data, in terms of how we design our cities, in terms of how we design new business models in the automotive industry, and how we connect the automotive industry. This is here we are you are representatives from the industry and also from the new business models of coming from industry. The more we match both things, industry, technology, and mobility, taking into account this solid base that we have in our countries, the more profit we will take in the future, maintaining all our autonomy, all our development that is especially based in Europe in the automotive industry, and developing very fast these new business models that obviously are coming and will include also new players as new startups, new entries from other sectors, etc. But taking into account this base will be very important.
As a mobility operator, I think I will select three of them. The first one is that, legally speaking, it's quite difficult to have a global approach in all the cities. A lot of local regulations are applying in all the cities, and it could be from one side to the other of the street. It's a new regulation. So trying to harmonize all the sector and trying to be as global as possible is this regulation needs to suit to these new mobilities. Second, I would say how we can go beyond the big cities. The big cities is a quite complex traffic solution, quite as commented. It makes sense to have different solutions, but what about the second or third level of cities with 100, 200,000 people living there, and how to make or give value to these citizens? And the third one is velocity. I'm really concerned about velocity. I'm really concerned about how fast everything is evolving, and who knows what is happening in 2023. So we are in city focused on the short-term, mid-term view, but in the long term is too far because of the velocity of the market and our competitors.
Well, in my view, I think there are many risks and challenges. First, we need to make all this business model profitable. And that's the biggest difficulty. Today, we all know cars are more and more expensive because of regulation, because of the change in energy, even though it is what we need to do. So we need to find a way, and that's what we're trying to do with Mobilize, is to find a way to make the user happy, the operator happy, the OEM happy, because at the beginning, you're investing, you're losing money. And that has a definite period of time, especially if we go in a period which is going to be with less available, easy money. So that's what we need to do together. The second thing is, indeed, today I don't think nobody has the solution on how to work in not big cities and to go to the suburbs, or even more difficult, to the very small town. And you're right, we need, I strongly believe that it can only succeed if we have association, collectivities, and professional work together, because the difficulty is in big cities you have trends, especially in Madrid, from my understanding. So it's easy for an operator to put the car where they need to be in the morning and put the car where they need to be in the evening. When you go to a rural area, it's a lot more complicated. So we need to work with public transportation, cities, association of users, professional, so that we can make it work. If not, they will have a huge difficulty to move to shared mobility and to electric mobility. And the third challenge, which is my view, is the biggest one in terms of adoption of electric mobility, is charging solution. Mm. We know that today 80% of people charge either at home or at work. At home, it's easy. We provide services. Many people provide services if you live in a home. If you live in an apartment, it's a nightmare. It's very difficult and you don't have access. First problem. Corporations, same thing. They want to put charging solution, but not too fast. And then on the road, and we saw that in France with the big weekends we just had, where people with electric cars have still difficulties. And we need, in my view, the help of the governments and the authorities to provide whatever is necessary so that we have the right capillarity of charging station, so that we can really move to greener mobility. It's what I think.
Yeah, Raoul, what are the government doing to boost the infrastructure for electric vehicles?
So here in Global Mobility Call, tomorrow will be a meeting that will be the governance group of the Spanish government, with the Prime Minister also coming here and different ministers, in order to develop the map of the infrastructure of the recharging points in Spain, to boost this infrastructure in Spain. As I said before, within the PERTE, this strategic project for the electric vehicle, there is a part on demand to foster the demand of electric vehicles, and a part to foster the infrastructure in Spain. So more than at least 300 million euros dedicated to foster the infrastructure. Then it should be cooperation between private and public-private, in the sense that we must develop a legal framework that should be positive to develop this recharging infrastructure, but on the other side, to promote the private investment, because as Clotilde has said, could be easy if you live in a house. That happens in Madrid, more or less, in the surroundings of Madrid, in another cities, maybe also in some rural areas. But then if you go to another areas, especially here in Spain, most of people live in apartments, and this is very difficult. So if you cannot set up a charging point for every apartment, but you should develop an infrastructure taking into account what we have in the country: oil stations, gas stations, etc., that could be perfect for these corridors of charging points through the countries, in the main highways, and developing these very fast. So developing these at the same time that the industry, in this case, is developing their investments here in Spain and in Europe, because otherwise we are developing the offer and not the demand. So tomorrow there will be a meeting in order to boost this infrastructure, in order to boost the governance, taking public-private. There will be some ministers, there will be the different business associations from industry to mobility in order to boost this infrastructure in Spain.
And Virginie, it is a global problem, isn't it? The lack of infrastructure for electric vehicles.
It is. Well, whether it is for electric mobility or for shared mobility, there are complex ecosystems where the private sector will need the infrastructure that can only be provided or partly provided by the public authorities, but the public authorities also need the service and the data, etc., that can be provided by the private sector. So there is huge efforts to be put on better aligning the value creations and value captures in these ecosystems, new ecosystems. But this is true worldwide. And then again, there are very good examples to look at when considering how a particularly scarce resource such as urban space in vastly congested urban areas is managed so as to promote certain services, dedicate certain amount of space to the development of shared mobility services, electric mobility, etc. So this is a worldwide problem with local configurations, local solutions, local, patterns of ecosystems that develop, which we should be aware of if we want to move forward faster, I'll say.
Javier, do you think that you have a role to help the whole automotive industry move forward?
Well, it's quite complex. What we have seen is different movements from the OEM, changing the model, stop selling the cars all the time and trying to see what is the value added into services, for example. This is the VAS model, Vehicle as a Service model that Movilidad has presented, and of course it's a huge amount of business there to go for it. So I think this is not an isolated movement. A lot of big OEMs are changing the model because the society has changed. The society is selecting city to go from A to B, and this a completely different model that is keeping the customer to the corporate. So I guess this is the first movement that is going to be real in the coming years, and the second one is what is going to happen with these people after these first years of using these mobility services. There could be future mobility services that are not already existing that could fulfill the needs of this one in the future. But today, what we have is a short portfolio, if you want, for covering certain use cases, but some of them are out of these ones. How we can evolve from the current situation to the future one is a big question in my head. It's not easy to do it, but for sure, in the middle, what we are going to have is a changing of the business model that traditionally speaking has been placed for the last maybe 1 century. So in our opinion, what we have enhanced with Mobilize is simplifying our lives because of the services that allow us to focus in our core business. And this is the main thing we can extract from that. We need to be very, very close to the customer. We need to deploy what services that our customers are asking us. And in the case of city, if in Madrid, for example, we only have 10 kilometers length of each trip, 30 minutes, it's nothing to do with the ownership of a car for 10 years. So if we don't build the cars, design it, build the cars, provide the services, and of course the allowing them to go from A to B in the most accurate way, we have nothing. So move for it and as soon as possible, because others are doing it.
I'd like to ask you all how you kind of square the circle of sustaining the automotive industry when cities around the world are becoming more anti-car. Certainly in London, you know, the cost of driving into London now is going up all the time. There's a congestion, there's a pollution charge on polluting vehicles. It just feels like there's more and more barriers wherever you go to driving into cities, understandably and for good reasons. But what does that mean for the future of the automotive industry?
Well, I think we have to adapt. We have no choice. It's just like the whole industry is going electric. Good news for us because we know how to deal with it. But we have to adapt. And I think we need also to understand the need of the users. If the users elect the mayors who decide those type of decisions, that means they agree with it, right? That's what we see in Paris. I mean, yes, indeed, there is only some routes. So we need to reinvent with the cities what a city should look like so that people living in the cities can still be mobile. By the way, in some cases, mayor may go too far because you can see, for example, in Paris, that people start to get out of the city. They don't want to live in the city. But that's another topic of reflection, I would think. Well, I think, in my view, first, for an OEM, you have the center of the big cities, and you have all the rest of the world. We have BAs, I think, in our thinking where we look very much into big capital of the world, big cities, and we think it is reflecting what is happening in the whole world. It is not the case. So for OEM, I think there is still quite a lot of bright future coming in because you still have, and again, once you have kids, believe me, you have to drive them to a rugby game or something else, you need the car. You're not going to take shared mobility to go to your home to just, not that far away in the same suburbs. So there's still a lot, I think, in the future of the car industry, but the car industry, as I said, needs to participate, envision, be in the forefront of this new mobility, because that's what is going to happen, but at a very different speed between what happens in Paris or Madrid versus what happened in the center of Morocco or India. So we're going to have to be able, and it is quite complicated for an OEM, to be able to, at the same time, innovate for the future of mobility as we know it here, and to innovate for the good and the health of people in India, in Brazil, or in Korea, right? So so different technology, different regulation, different needs. But the good thing I see, and that's what we're doing with Mobilize, is why can't we, with shared mobility, electric shared mobility, be the forefront even in the country which are not electric? And that's what we're doing in Brazil. In Brazil, we're providing Limo, the car that we're introducing for a shared ride-hailer. We're going to be providing our other vehicles, shared mobility, electric, in countries where you have at most no electric. And then you use it to make people discover what it means driving electric.
So how will you, it's a chicken and egg, isn't it?
Yeah.
You're providing the cars, but who's going to provide the charging point?
We are. The good thing is, with Mobilize, we can provide the whole thing. And I think it is our role, at least that's the way I see our mission as Mobilize, is to help move to greener, shared, more accessible, more affordable mobility, means electric. And even if it does not exist, the role of the OEM, I think, is to prepare the future.
Okay, thank you. And Javier, what's your thoughts on squaring this circle of anti-car cities?
Cars are not the same, petrol or electric or big ones, small ones. I think it's not against the cars. It's against several or certain part of the fleet, all fleet. I think the average in Madrid is over 13, 14 years old cars. This is something that needs to be changed. The cars are being stopped by 95%. This is something that needs to change. So I don't think the cities are just thinking we want to avoid, or at least it's not the right approach in my opinion, to avoid having cars in the center of the city or around the city or not crossing the city. There could be several approaches that are the correct ones, but none of them are, okay, we don't want to have cars on the cities. So selecting the right type of cars, the right usage of the cars, the right services that could fulfill the portfolio of mobility in a city like Madrid or Paris that could be complementary to the public transport, this could be the right approach. It's not only we don't want cars. We want to have the right amount of cars, the right type of cars, and for the right usage of the cars. Once you have it, it's, legally speaking, it's quite complex, and this is it's one of my concerns. But I think it's possible, and some cities are going step by step to this future with less cars, of course, more used cars, and in a smart way, and also electric cars.
Okay, thank you, Raoul.
We think that we should be balanced and flexible in the same, following the criteria and the items that my colleagues have said. The problem is not the car. The car has been in Europe and in the rest of the world, in the last century has been one of the main sources of freedom. So this is very clear. So I absolutely defend the car and the car industry, but the car is freedom. So we should not focus on the car, but in the problems generated. So the problems are emissions, okay. So how to reduce emissions in the city centers, how to make compatible the car with other mobility ways like the ones that Javier has said perfectly, and the public transport, etc. So this compatibility, this combination, this balance is the positive way of facing the future in our cities. So if we focus only in making difficult the life of the car drivers, this will be a failure, and this will generate the reaction on the other side of different associations, political movements on the other side. So there are ways that are perfectly balanced, represented here in example by cities or different types of mobility ways in a city center, and we should defend how to plan our cities, not against the car, not against the individual freedom of how we move in our cities, because also this is a very urban debate. Our countries are more plural than only the city centers. Of course, if we talk about the main center of Madrid, Barcelona, Paris, or London, as you have said, this is a debate for some millions of people, but the rest of people is living around, they need the car, so we should not focus in the car, because the car is also our freedom to move from point to point, and this should continue. See, the problems are emissions, okay, these are very well focused and very well managed, and the commitment on the industry is very clear. And on the other side, try to work in a more flexible, balanced way, especially how in the city managing, because we find very oftenly this way of the car is the problem. We are going to make impossible the life of the car driver in our cities, and this is not the way, because we can combine perfectly all the models that we are seeing, the mobility ways that we are seeing here in the global mobility call, and they are absolutely compatible with reducing emissions. They are absolutely compatible with having a friendly city centers, and they are also compatible also with the freedom of choosing of the individuals, of the person, in order to choose, depending on the kind of mobility you need every day, to choose the different ways.
Okay, thank you. Virginie?
I see an opportunity in solving this apparently difficult equation, actually, because we're moving from a time when the car could be the default option for many people, because it could seem possible to virtually use it without any limitation, and it was convenient, it was cheap. What we're facing now, the types of challenges, whether it is congestion, whether it is local air pollution or global greenhouse gas emissions, and the rise in oil prices too, leaves us in a world where collectively we have to make other choices, but also individually sometimes. And the opportunity is to think about the car in terms of where is it relevant and how is it relevant. So what type of cars, what type of services using the car, etc., in combination with which other services. And in this new way of looking at the car and asking, where is it relevant and how is it relevant? There are also opportunities for business and opportunities for development in areas in populations where the car is not as developed now as it could be for the sake of economic development, human development, etc., but also of better management in some areas where maybe we have gone maybe too far, considering the types of urban space we have, considering the types of constraints on oil production there will be in the future, etc., etc. So I really see an opportunity rather than a difficulty in solving the equation, but a lot of work. a lot of work
for
ahead.
everybody. And we just have a few minutes. If you could just maybe sum up in the final couple of minutes your thoughts on how technology can help us solve mobility problems, but in the next 5 to 10 years. Just briefly.
Well, in my view, two ways. The first one is data. You have a lot of data which is available in the cars, and that can provide you, as I said before, a way to improve the customer journey. What we say is people want to be mobile, and I fully agree with that. The car means freedom to work, freedom to do whatever, but ability to work in most cases. So we need to be able to continue to provide that. Data helps you improve the customer journey. And if you improve the customer journey, you make it simpler, greener, etc. So my view is exactly that. And us, the role of the OEM is to make sure that we, together with the data, we provide the right objects, which are the ones that are least emitting, least place, so that they can still accept it in the cities.
Yeah, I will add real-time data.
Real-time, you would add. It's very true.
It's really, really important. This real-time, this accurate data, but in real time that can allow us to improve the services, to go to exactly at the moment, at the time, at the service that is demanded. No? So this real-time data and real-time services through the real-time data is going to change the world.
Thank you.
So everything is changing very fast, so we must work to make possible this matching between the evolution of industry and technology. Obviously, we are focusing right now in the electric vehicle, but we should have also technological neutrality in order for the coming technologies in eco-combustibles, I don't know how to say it in English, eco-fuels, hydrogen, next generation technologies, etc. on one side, being very flexible in this technological neutrality, and on the other side, being also very flexible, as we have said before, in order to make compatible with the evolution of mobility in real time, as Javier has said. So real time for technology, data, and evolution of our cities. A lot of work also, as you have said.
I completely agree with everything that was said. I will go one step further. Data, I'll go to knowledge, and I think technology has a huge role to play in the type of knowledge we have of the choices we make individually, collectively, the impacts of the choices we make, and then the way we can, have a feedback loop on these choices and go towards the right direction that we choose for ourselves. So, yeah, definitely in this area, and I'm not only saying that because I'm a researcher, but in this area, and for the sake of research, for the sake of education, for the sake of regulation and capacity building in public authorities, etc., I'd say technology still has a huge role to play in terms of knowledge building in general.
Yeah. Brilliant. Well, we will leave it on that note. Thank you all very much for joining me and for your time. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.